Welcome to a very special edition of the Spiritual Language Teacher podcast. My name is Sophie, and I'm the Spiritual Language Teacher. For this fifth edition of the podcast, I wanted to offer a shorter episode created for a very special audience, world language teachers. I'm going to share a practice I've been using in my classroom for the past 2 years, one that has been profoundly transformational, especially this past year, both spiritually for my students and myself, and in terms of language acquisition and student voluntary output. I've been using this activity with my French pre-K to third grade students, and while I do have my own classroom, this low to no prep activity can be adapted to any language, any age, and any setting, even if you do not have your own classroom. It checks all the boxes of self-determination theory, autonomy, competence, and relatedness. In my fourth podcast, I reframed autonomy, competence, and relatedness into sovereignty, coherence, and resonance to define what embodied co-creation is, and this activity is a true act of embodied co-creation between students and teachers. If you're curious to learn about that, I'm inviting you to listen to my fourth podcast. So far, the format of my podcast has been to explore a spiritual concept, share a personal experience connected to that concept, and anchor it through a deep dive into a special children's book, concluding with home bliss practices instead of homework, short, easy, but powerful practices. In this special edition, I will not use a children's book, and I will go straight into describing the practice. If you're not a world language teacher, but you are a human, this practice can be done on your own or with your children and can be adapted to your needs. So the concept we're exploring today is gratitude. And if you're thinking, yes, big deal, I've heard it before, stay with me here because there is much more to gratitude than meets the eyes. And the real secret of gratitude may not be what you think, and I will reveal it in just a moment. Let's first have a look at the etymology and cultural evolution of the word gratitude. Gratitude comes from the Latin word gratitudo, which means thankfulness. It is related to gratus, meaning pleasing or thankful, and gratia, meaning favor or grace. This is a crucial detail. Gratitude and grace share a common etymology, gratia. We will come back to that at the very end of the podcast. Over time, the meaning and use of gratitude have moved through several layers, from a social practice that reinforces cooperation and reciprocity to a moral and spiritual virtue expressed as thanks to God, ancestors, and benefactors. In modern psychology, gratitude has been reframed as a positive emotion and a trainable skill linked to better mental health, stronger relationships, and compassionate behavior in both children and adults. Gratitude is also recognized as a stabilizing force for the nervous system, emotional coherence, and language acquisition. So if gratitude is such a positive force, why hasn't the education system woven it into the official curriculum from the very beginning? Imagine if, starting at age 4, children practice simple daily gratitude, gentle breathing, and nervous system nurturing, tiny playful rituals repeated through elementary, middle school, high school, and even college, rituals that are truly child's play, by the way. What would happen? Well, children will grow into naturally sovereign beings, coherent, resonant with themselves and the world, grounded mentally and physically. But that level of sovereignty runs counter to what the current system is designed to produce. The education system is not built to cultivate sovereign, coherent, resonant beings or to function through embodied co-creation. It is built to control and extract. These are two very different frequencies. Gratitude practice builds the stamina of the nervous system, and nervous system stamina is the root of sovereignty. This is precisely why gratitude is intentionally not embedded into the official curriculum. That kind of inner power is perceived as a threat. And when the system does recognize the power of these practices, it often seeks to contain them by appropriating them. For example, by packaging them into a mandatory assembly, a required summer reading, or a checkbox initiative. In doing so, it dilutes their essence, neutralizes their transformative potential, and effectively puts a stop to the very liberation these practices were meant to awaken. But sovereignty, by its very nature, cannot be extracted. It can only be given away. This is where our conscious refusal to surrender our inner authority becomes the quiet revolution. The system can no longer sustain itself when we stop voluntarily subjecting ourselves to extraction and control. And this is true for all of us as human beings and for all systems, not only the education system. So if we, as human beings and as teachers, are to thrive rather than survive in this period of transition, the key is our sovereignty. And again, sovereignty is rooted in the stamina of our nervous system, which itself emanates from the simple but radical practice of gratitude. Are you convinced yet? But wait, there's more. The key to gratitude practice is, drumroll, self-gratitude. Practicing self-gratitude grounds ourselves in the moment, within ourselves. If we are not here, what are we to be grateful for? It starts with gratitude for me and for my nervous system. Self-gratitude is so powerful because it is not a feeling. It is a state of being. It is the portal to sovereignty, to the now, and to self-love. Can't get any more powerful than that. David R. Hawkins, who was a psychiatrist, who developed the map of consciousness, which is a scale that organizes human emotions and states of awareness from shame and fear up to love, joy, and enlightenment into measurable levels of energy, calls gratitude a high vibration, heart-based state of consciousness that lives in the same territory as love, joy, and peace. He also calls gratitude one of the most wonderful things and the way of the heart, emphasizing that it shifts us from resentment into thankfulness for life and all experiences. But don't take his word or my word for it. You can experience the way of the heart for yourself and in your target language. At first, it will feel strange, silly, or even scary and inauthentic, and that is completely fine. It is a practice. I like to say that at the beginning, when you say these words, I am grateful for me and for my nervous system, it is intellectual only. But as you keep doing this practice, coupled with a simple breath that I'm going to describe, you will start noticing that gratitude shifts from your head to your heart. This is true if you do this on your own, but when it is done in the classroom with students and children, many of whom are highly sensitive, you're going to feel something, and that is embodied co-creation. This practice is wonderful to begin in the first few days of class, though maybe not the very first day. I start with my classroom walls completely bare, and for the first few classes, you do not need anything for this activity. Then after some time, I will put in a corner of the room some signs that read Gratitude's Corner, in my target language, Le Coin de la Gratitude. All my signs are on fluorescent color cardstock written with markers, one color for the target language in large letters, and another color for English in smaller letters, or a simple design to establish meaning. The first time I introduced the practice, I asked my students the following question. Children and dolphins have two things in common. What are they? Depending on the level of your students, you can ask this in the target language. I personally do not, but I use this as an opportunity to teach the words children, les enfants, and dolphins, les dauphins. I established a practice in the first few days in English, and then I use both languages. Eventually, I am in French most of the time, and students will spontaneously translate into English. In any case, I no longer stress about this because I know the seeds I am planting will sprout and produce amazing results, even if we consider only language acquisition and voluntary output. So going back to our question, what are two things that dolphins and children have in common? Have the students guess and remind them that you're looking for two things that only children, especially under 7, and dolphins share. For example, it is not swimming because adults can swim. If they need clues, you can ask, if you were to observe adults on the playground, what would they do? What would they not do? What do children do? If they're able to guess, wonderful. And if they don't, provide them the answer. The two things that children and dolphins have in common are number one, play. Play, as well as jouer in French, is linked to the Sanskrit root las, which means both to resound and to radiate or to shine. A related root, lesso, also means desire and to play. I love this because it suggests that in ancient linguistic fields, play was connected to the expression of inner light and desire. To play, to resound, to radiate is the natural essence of children, especially under 7. When you have students older than 7, you can tell them that with practice, they do not have to forget how to play or how to radiate, and that as adults, we can also practice and remember how to play, and the practice of gratitude is one way. The second thing is wisdom. Ask your students what wisdom is or what it means. I usually connect with the Greek word philosophy and the French cognate philosophie. Philo means love and Sophia means wisdom. I tell my students that part of my first name, Sophie in Anne-Sophie, means wisdom, and I also notice if there are other students whose names carry that meaning. If no one can define wisdom, I offer the definition that I now use, provided to me directly from the wisdom of a 4-year-old child, and I tell them that wisdom is thinking from the heart. And gratitude comes from wisdom, from thinking from the heart. And what is gratitude? It is simply saying thank you. At this time, I would say, put your hands on your heart, where gratitude comes from, where thinking from the heart lives, and I say, I have gratitude for me and for my nervous system. In French, I use a literal translation. J'ai de la gratitude pour moi et pour mon système nerveux. I explain that just by putting our hands on our heart, we're sending a signal to our nervous system that we are safe, that we are okay, that we are seen, that we are loved. And this is a gesture, a tool that we can use anytime we feel that we need it. So this is the practice. Guide the children to do the following and do it with them. And I'm including a script of this practice in English and in French in the show notes. Place your hands over your heart. Close your eyes if that feels safe. Take a deep breath in. Hold it gently at the top for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Exhale all the air out. Rest at the bottom. 1, 2, 3. Repeat that breath. Breathe in at the top. 1, 2, 3. Breathe out and rest at the bottom. 1, 2, 3. Say, I have gratitude for myself and for my nervous system. And then I have gratitude for something else. Everyone silently thinks of their gratitude. After a few seconds, you say, open your eyes, then invite your students to whisper their gratitude into their hand, then ask them to throw it toward what is on the screen. Then ask, who wants to share their gratitude? About the sharing is always voluntary, and there are never any comments or questions about what is shared. You will see how crucial this is when you do it, and this is why it is something to mention clearly the first few times. And about throwing the whisper gratitude toward the image on the screen, that is because I start class with a meditation video that I project on the screen, usually featuring an animal. In my classroom, students throw their whisper gratitude toward that image on the screen. But you can adapt this to your own circumstances. You can simply say, throw it to the universe, or invite students to choose their own image or word for where their gratitude goes. So this is the overall practice. There are infinite ways to adapt and elaborate in your target language. With the breathing, I might use the word fly, voler at the top of the breath, and float, flotter at the bottom of the breath, or stop, arrêtez, ou arrêtez-vous, or many other possibilities. I might also count 1 to 3, or up to 10, or backwards, or by tens to 100, or any other sequences like 76, 77, 78, because it is difficult. In French, 76, 77, 78. With classroom jobs, one job for older students can be the gratitude coordinator or meditation guide. That person models the practice, can guide it, and in my case, I like to have them designate the people who are volunteering to share their gratitude. They name the person and listen. I listen as well and point with my laser pointer to the words they use, and I repeat what they say when it feels appropriate. As the weeks pass, if you have an actual gratitude corner, it grows with words that come from the wisdom of the heart of the students. These words are also a message for us as teachers. They become the visual representation of classroom co-creation. We get to know students and ourselves in a very different way, much less superficial. What comes out is what students could not express in a regular setting. We're truly co-creating a field. And little by little, students are acquiring new words and structures. The practice language itself and the gratitude words that are added to our gratitude corner daily or weekly. Students volunteer to share something deeply personal, and because they are guided to do it on their own terms, first in English and then in the target language when they feel ready, the expression remains authentic. So what is really happening here? Why does it feel so magical, both energetically and in terms of language acquisition? Energetically, the first step is the intellectual gratitude, practice from an empty cup. We begin with a practice of self-gratitude. At first, it feels like a mental exercise because we're giving gratitude from an empty cup, but we do it anyway, again and again, 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day with our students, and perhaps even more on our own. This is the seed phase. We're planting coherence, even if we do not feel it just yet. From the point of view of second language acquisition, this step, in Stephen Krashen's terms, is the step of safe input with a lowered affective filter. We're creating a low anxiety, emotionally safe environment in which students receive lots of comprehensible input without pressure to perform. The repeated self-gratitude practice we're offering lowers the affective filter, which makes that input easier to receive and process. Step 2 is the heart field activation, or when we start filling the cup. As we continue, our gratitude moves from the head to the heart. We start to feel genuine warmth, coherence, and self-worth, as if the cup within us is filling. The practice begins to feel less forced and more like a natural expression of how we truly feel. In terms of second language acquisition, the second step is a stage of deeper acquisition through meaningful interaction, where input begins to turn into genuine acquisition. Students move from simply hearing the language to feeling it as meaningful and connected to their lives. Krashen's input hypothesis and natural approach stress meaningful interaction and focus on messages rather than grammar. As emotional safety and interest rise, the learner's internal system starts organizing the language according to a natural order. The heart-based coherence supports exactly that shift from just listening to true internalization. And finally, step 3 is when gratitude is given from overflow. Our cup is not only full, but starts overflowing. With repetition, the practice deepens and our nervous system becomes more coherent. Now, our gratitude is no longer just a practice. It is a state of being. We give gratitude from the overflow of the cup directly from the heart, and this raises our frequency and allows us to vibrate at the frequency of receiving. And remember that I mentioned at the beginning that the Latin root gratia carries both gratitude and grace. Gratitude is the emotional signature of being in the ultimate state of receiving. And in that state, we begin to receive grace. This is the moment when grace becomes our default frequency. When we receive and we have overflow, we can start giving. The more we receive, the more we can give. The more we give gratitude, the more we receive grace. The more we can give gratitude, the more grace we receive. We have joined in the spiral of self-love. In terms of second language acquisition, this third step corresponds to the emergence of natural, spontaneous output. At this point, language is no longer a conscious practice, but an integrated state. Learners communicate for real purposes with less monitoring and more authentic expression, which Krashen describes as the hallmark of acquisition rather than mere learning. Students who share their gratitude are speaking from an inner reservoir of acquired language, not from memorized rules, and they do so in a supported, safe environment with visual cues and teacher assistant available when needed. So this simple but radical practice of gratitude, in Hawkins' words, is a way to honor the gift of our own coherence and a bridge of transformation. This bridge is leading us and our students from safe input with a lowered affective filter and intellectual gratitude given from an empty cup to deeper acquisition through meaningful interaction and gratitude given from the wisdom of our hearts as our inner cup begins to fill, and finally to the emergence of natural, spontaneous, authentic output and a state of gratitude arising from overflow where we resonate with the state of receiving grace. Are you convinced yet? The best part is that you do not even need to understand what happens behind the scenes. All you have to do is lead the practice for yourself and your students, feel how it goes, and then simply reap what you have sown. I end each podcast with a thank you in a different language. So far, I've used thank you in English, merci in French, ta in Australian English, spasiba in Russian, köszönöm in Hungarian, and sadhu, a Pali term with a Sanskrit root used by Buddhist monks. Because in this special episode, I do not have a children's book to link my specific thank you to, I will use the Spanish term gracias to dedicate this closing to all world language teachers. Spanish is often the majority language among world language programs, and teachers of other languages may sometimes find themselves in the minority. Yet, it is not because a language is widely used that it is easier to teach. Very often, the opposite is true, and most of us can understand gracias. So, gracias to all of us wonderful world language teachers. If you like this episode, like and subscribe. If you want to see a video of this podcast, head out to my YouTube channel at youtube.com@The Spiritual Language Teacher. And please like, subscribe, and don't hesitate to comment. If you have comments, questions, you can also reach me via Instagram at The Spiritual Language Teacher or by email at thespirituallanguageteacher@gmail.com. So thank you, merci, ta, spasiba, kusanam, sadhu, and gracias. And as always, remember to breathe.